Welcome to the SAP Mobile Advisor podcast. Thanks for joining us. Here we unpack real-world stories and strategies from the front lines of enterprise mobility. So whether you're navigating your first SAP rollout or optimizing global operations, we're here to bring clarity, insight, and a few lessons learned, perhaps the hard way. My name is Damian Peterson, your co-host, along with Steve Green. And with each episode, we're going to sit down and chat with IT leaders, supply chain experts, and other seasoned professionals to talk about, just to talk shop, share war stories, and explore what it really takes to deliver business value with SAP. Let's dive in. Today, we've got Matt Lawrence from Charles River Labs. You know, Matt, in 2023, we first started chatting, and at that time you were looking for, and I went back and looked at your RFP, you were looking for a turnkey, state-of-the-art mobile solution delivering SAP inventory transactions at a GMP facility. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So to get started, Matt, maybe, how about if you don't mind, just share a little bit about what's your role at Charles River and what does Charles River do?
Yeah, so Charles River Labs is a contract research organization. We support a lot of different industries, commercial industries, manufacturing. We support pharmaceutical and biotechs, really helping to drive drugs and products to market from anywhere from preclinical and on, as well as a lot of different industries. The one that I am heavily focused on is our global manufacturing business, which encompasses contract manufacturing, CDMO, the biologics testing, as well as our microbial solutions. And that's specifically where, the solution that we worked with Havensight on was employed. And specifically, my role as a director of business optimization within that global manufacturing unit is really trying to seek out and find critical initiatives where we think there's untapped value or large opportunity, potentially issues and things that we're trying to address, and really trying to bring those things to light, and then also kind of establish current state, future state, and then really driving towards solutions. So happy to come on here and kind of discuss what we went through with HCG and really driving, towards a really solid solution that we employed for our CDMO business.
Okay, thanks for that. So what I'm curious about is before you selected a product or solution to go mobile, what was going on in your business, right? What was driving a cause for change? Let's just start there. What was going on in your business?
Yeah, since acquisition of these businesses, there was kind of a constant evolution and a large growth factor. So as these businesses grow and the processes that they had since established, they were maybe not as scalable as they needed to be. So really looking at how do we try to drive towards our best practices? How do we drive towards our future state to really employ the best possible process within each of these different business units, and specifically the supply chain, material management, inventory management, planning component was a place where, we were kind of really driving towards best practice and really wanting to improve on the current state within our Memphis manufacturing site and developing those cell therapeutics at that site. So looking into, different opportunities and how we could do that, different functionalities, software, technology, devices, and really driving towards that best practice was really what kind of prompted the search. Obviously, it's an evolving regulatory landscape as well. So making sure that we're constantly in touch with the compliance and driving best practices from a quality perspective, as well as an efficiency and overall delivery perspective, was really what was driving us towards a more improved solution, something that was really going to drive efficiencies, create a better work environment and user experience for our team on site, as well as drive towards a really highly regulated and controlled process.
Cool. That's helpful. So one of the outcomes then is looking at mobile, right? Is kind of what I'm hearing there, and so when you started to look for a mobile solution, what was important to Charles River at the time, right? What was critical to the business as you were looking at a solution to be successful?
Yeah, the current state of that process was pretty manual. right? It was very manual. There was paper-based components. It was a bit of a hybrid system alongside SAP, with SAP being our driving system in the ECC environment. We knew that there was going to be an advancement as opposed to using just the GUI that you typically see there, and driving kind of that direct usage within that GUI. And we really wanted to look to drive the user experience in a more beneficial direction, a more efficient direction, as well as eliminate a lot of those manual components, and being able to look at a solution from a mobile scanning perspective, driving the barcoding of our materials, bringing consistency to that master data, as well as create these different points of control that live within the system instead of the individual. What we were able to do was really start to address some of the core problems that we would see. So being able to see these points where we have inflection points where we have to make decisions on the floor, if we could drive users towards the best practice, towards the right decision, and not create a million different decision points. So that introduction of control surrounding the mobile device, it wasn't as simple as just slapping on scanning and barcoding on top of our current process. It was really a redevelopment and redesign of that end-to-end process, with around which we could kind of functionalize the SAP warehouse management solution, combined with this scanning application that the Havensight helped us develop.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Matt, so obviously we'll have some SAP customers looking at this, probably listening to this over time. Through the selection process, I assume you looked at different solutions from different sources before you selected the Havensight solution. What were some of the things you guys learned along the way? If there were some key decisions, key questions that your team came up with, key requirements that they had, kind of what drove the decision-making process before you made the final call?
Yeah, I think a level of customizability and flexibility, and really the openness to have that discussion, right? What I didn't want to get stuck in was trying to toss on a templated build onto our process, because I knew the process had
Right.
to evolve to kind of support our best practice. So being able to work with Havensight and really kind of develop that best practice, learning from what you guys have experienced across different clients within the industry, learning what our personnel had experienced under the current state, as well as from their different backgrounds, really having an open conversation, discussing that development plan, working around what we developed as far as a user requirement or a business requirements document, how that kind of then relayed into the functional specs that you guys helped develop. That started to really lay down the path for us. You really want to go into a solution like this knowing what you want, so that you can very clearly speak to that. So when you can speak to your requirements, that business requirement document was something that we kind of developed for this with a lot of effort, even before we engage with you all, to be able to speak to what we need. And then that really made that functional spec development and really the alignment across our teams much more efficient, much smoother, because we were able to speak a little bit more clearly to what we needed. And then you guys were able to deliver on that, combined with our SAP development team. So you get all these people kind of working off of a common source of truth. It really allows you, I think, to develop something much quicker, which we'll talk, I'm sure, at some point about the timelines that we delivered on, and how, impressive that was across the board. But, kind of going back to that single source of truth and having us all being able to kind of go back to that North Star, whatever you want to call it, as far as the information that we were all kind of working off of. So really know what you're looking for when you go into it, and then be able to translate the needs of your business as it relates to the system, the SAP data, and how you're really going to utilize those different applications and functionalities.
And did those requirements that you guys defined, and you guys did a really good job of doing your preparation before the project kicked off, did that drive the technology decision on which technology you wanted to go forward with? Did the requirements kind of dictate what technical solution framework you need to use to meet it?
Yeah, I think it did, especially from a device perspective, right? We really kind of knew what we needed as far as different things to drive cycle counting, different environments that we work within. We do have temperature controlled units, anywhere from ambient or room temperature all the way up to, minus 150 degrees, minus
Right.
170 degrees. So these different temperature requirements across the warehouse, and then the use cases tied to each of them, are different. We might spend more time in a minus 20 than we do counting that ultra cold material. So you might need a device that can support that. So we wound up with a couple different devices built for those needs. But then on top of that, the different applications that we built were again kind of focused on our specific needs and what we were looking to correct, as opposed to building something that maybe was super over engineered, had a lot of functionality that you don't wind up using. I liked the approach that we took, which is driving some of the stuff in there, having a chance to get feedback, having a chance to kind of refine and then work through what that looks like and whether or not it actually satisfies our needs before it got pushed into production. And then we really, started to use it. So being able to play around in that sandbox environment, driving through the quality component, making a decision, and then driving towards, your formal UAT scripts validation component before you actually drive it into production. I think that requirement document definitely helped us stay focused on what we truly needed, because as you talk more about this, the scope can get very wide very quickly. So you've got to make sure you don't get too much of that scope creep, because you can chase a lot of different, paths here, but trying to focus on those big impactful components was key here, especially with some of the time constraints that we did have.
Yeah. Good.
So before we move into this next segment here, Matt, if you don't mind, just do a quick summary for me. So summarize like what you just shared, with our users. So if you don't mind, can you summarize what were those key decision criteria?
The key selection criteria?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really driving towards a solution that we know was mobile. So it could be working with your team, very easy to handle. It had to be able to scan, a relatively simple QR code that held basic information from SAP. It had to integrate with SAP, seamlessly and flawlessly. We did not want to have to recreate inventory into a separate device. We see that in different execution systems. Sometimes you need to copy your entire inventory over and work through that. That's not the way that this works at all. It integrates directly into SAP. It utilizes the warehouse management functionality. It allows us to create storage bins, be able to full on do all the kind of end-to-end processes. So we were able to build out applications that addressed receiving with a PO, receiving without a PO, cycle counts, picking of material, transferring of materials across sites, bin-to-bin transfers. We built an application around consumption within suite, which really helped us close, some traceability gaps that we had. The ability to do QC sampling for testing and products that are, in a quality inspection state as opposed to unrestricted. So there's quite a lot of functionality that was built in there. And we developed kind of from the most important ones. And, as we developed those applications and we went live, what we were able to do through working with Havensight, our internal SAP team, and then our operational leaders on site was really learn the system, own the product itself. At the end of this, you own that code, you own the ability to kind of continue to evolve and iterate on your product. And we've been able to do that as well with some support from Havensight, as well as our internal teams. We're driving continual development of this solution. So we've been able to add additional functionality, iterate on the initial things, because once you go live, you really learn a lot. And being able to own that, independently, if you've got the resources to do so, or again, be able to work with someone like Havensight on an ongoing basis. We had a PCAP to kind of resolve some of those things over time, being able to kind of build out some additional functionality when it required. That was very critical, because post hypercare, you don't want that tool to kind of just stagnate and kind of fall off. We've been able to continue to build on it, and it is critical, and it is embedded into pretty much every aspect of our supply chain and material handling.
All right. We're getting into the futures here, so let's transition, right? So this segment we just wrapped up was, really what were your business requirements? What was important to your business, before you selected a mobile solution? You're live now. You're live. You've been live for about a year, right?
Yeah.
So how about just start with how are things going? Like how are things today, 1 year later?
Good. Yeah. I mean, it's easy for me to remember, right? The birth of my daughter basically at
Yep.
go live. So we're 1 year in, 13 months in. And it's going really well. I've already mentioned we're kind of continuing to iterate on the tool to build out additional functionalities, but it's embedded into every piece of our material process, from receipt to consumption to scrap to return of materials, all tied to our production records. So it is truly, kind of a best in practice type solution that is driving our supply chain forward. It has allowed us to really look forward in some of the additional digital initiatives that we're exploring around execution systems and things like that, electronic batch records. We've got such a strong foundation around the material, which really drives a lot of the production. So being very solidified and knowing that we've also got folks on site that own the solution and own the tool, understand it because they understand the data, the transactions, and what's happening in the background, all while being able to deliver a very kind of simple user interface for anyone new to that process. The training and kind of the continuity of use of that tool has become a heck of a lot easier than trying to get someone fully up to speed on maybe, a very standard SAP prod GUI. So driving on that as well, HCG also helped us develop some of the training solutions alongside with our training and OCM folks in Charles River. And that's stuff that we continue to utilize to date for new employees and, making sure that we can kind of bring people on board quick to this solution. So definitely going well. It continues to evolve. And honestly, we're looking to drive now this solution out to other sites and really leveraging this functionality that we've built and seen be very successful. We want to try to drive it to other businesses within CDMO as well as beyond into further global manufacturing.
I heard you say a strong foundation, right? You feel like you're in a position now you have a strong foundation. I remember, Matt, is at the beginning of the project, you were speaking about you had some expected improvements to your business that you were expecting to get out of this project. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, there's definitely some critical metrics that we were trying to measure against, and there's obviously some of the soft benefits as well, and the ease of use, the control over the process, the ability to kind of adapt to some of the issues. And really what it does help call out is once you control that process, you can very quickly call out where you're seeing errors and seeing issues arise, and you can then go and correct them. And we even built in some of those things right off the bat, right? You don't find a material, great. We're going to go ahead and block it. We're going to find it. We're going to go ahead and address it with a cycle count. Things like that took a little bit longer and were a little harder to call out previously are now more easily identifiable, and then we can drive the solutions quickly. But inventory accuracy, right? To be able to be the ability to transact in real time and making sure that those transactions are accurate, relay directly to your system of record in SAP. We've seen our inventory accuracy skyrocket to nearly perfect in pretty much every aspect of what we're driving when it comes to, different LN2 storage and inventory, our ambient inventory, the raw materials component. We've seen a massive increase there as far as the inventory accuracy, which then allows you to plan more effectively, understand usage, how you're going to satisfy the needs of your production teams. That's been really good. One of the other things that has really driven down and in a more positive direction is ASAP orders, right? Things that come up because of a lack of visibility into your inventory and reliability of that. We've seen those immediate orders where you have to kind of put out that fire immediately. We've seen that decrease to almost zero as well in very unique situations that only is happening as opposed to, that was kind of a rule at some point. So I think the ability to do those two things is massive. We've been able to address a lot of master data discrepancies because we're calling them out now. We're being able to locate them. So the system across the board has really improved from a data integrity standpoint because you place in all those points of control and the system really guides you to where you need to focus. So some really good, strong metrics there that we're really seeing positive impact on.
And Matt, you guys were coming from paper and pencil. So, old school, we've been doing it like that forever, and you've made the move, and it's a big change, right? And change management, as you've mentioned, was a big part of this project. What kind of benefit have you seen from a user standpoint? Have they embraced the technology, and what kind of benefit have you seen with the users by moving to the mobile technology?
Yeah, I'm going to say paper and pen. The pencil thing, you made my heart skip a beat with the regulatory environment,
And
right?
correct, yeah.
The pencil stuff is what,
Permanent.
but I'm just, no,
Yeah.
that's just a, yeah. But no, it's a really good point, because all of those manual processes, right? Whenever you had to make a correction or something that wasn't quite right in SAP, that takes a whole backtrack. You've got to go back. You got to retroactively make those corrections. You've really got to be really on point. You have to have a very disciplined team. It takes a lot of effort. And then to resolve all that paperwork and then track that paperwork, maintain that paperwork, archive it, make sure you have those records to go back and look at 3 months from now, 6 months from now. Incredible amount of effort. And we were lucky we had a team that really did push for that effort, and they were doing a good job, but it was not sustainable, right? It's not a scalable solution. So everyone was really excited about this solution. I think there was a certain level of uncertainty, right? What can you deliver? This all sounds really great. But I think as soon as we got it into play, I mean, we've got several videos and kind of feedback from actual end users that have talked about the ease of use, how much it has improved their kind of day to day, not to mention the lack of, the extreme decrease in deviations and certain recording errors and things of that, documentation issues. All those things are greatly decreased. So that means you don't have to spend time going back and fixing those things. So the user experience has greatly improved. The feedback from our end users have been great. I think it's definitely having a direct impact on retention, employee morale, employee engagement, things like that are very critical and very important to us. You've got a much happier team. They're part of the solution. As we were going through this, we're engaging with them. We're talking with them, how they're using the system, how they're built into the process. And that was a part of why we were able to build such a successful solution. Me going in there and thinking that I know how it's going to run is not going to create our best practice. Just like Havensight wouldn't be able to go in there and say, hey, this is exactly what you should do. You engage with the team members and you really understand what they need. They're part of the solution. That increases that buy-in, really makes that change management a lot smoother. So very happy from that perspective. And I think being a part of that solution has really, proven to be beneficial for them.
All right. Anything else, Steve, in your mind regarding to now they're live? Anything else jump on your mind to like how has the business changed, right? Like those kind of questions.
Well, I think the thing that I'm glad Matt shared was that the team was involved in the creation of the solution, and the team being, because a lot of times I think the folks on the floor that are going to use the solution get forgotten in the process. And your team, Matt, did a really good job of keeping them engaged in the process all along the way, taking their feedback throughout the process, throughout the build, throughout the training, and making sure that whatever you delivered was going to get consumed. Because we've done this for a long time at Havensight, and eras before Havensight, and it seems like the most important thing is to make sure there's usage of the system. And if you don't do it the right way up front, which you guys did, you can end up with shelfware. You can end up with devices not being used and back using paper processes. So I was super encouraged throughout the project, hearing from our team and hearing it from you today that a year on, things have really played out nicely. So appreciate you sharing that. And I don't know if anything else maybe that they've shared in these videos that maybe you would apply to future projects or that might help other people. I mean, there may be things that you guys learned from feedback from your users that we could share with other customers going forward.
Yeah, I think it is a wide range, right? I think we went into this with a pretty good idea of what we were looking for and what we wanted. We were fortunate enough to have some folks that understood SAP and really knew the system, but it was a wide range of people, right? There's also people that were brand new to the system. So I think we were able to leverage the partnership with Havensight and really kick around a lot of ideas. And the solutions that we maybe came with initially were not always exactly where we landed, right? Because Havensight has seen this with other companies, other businesses. We were able to work through some solutions, and every now and then they're bringing in different folks from that team as well to kind of talk about, here's how we can kind of handle what we're calling tote management, right? The ability to ship materials between sites there's handling units, there's ways to do bin to bin transfers. There's a lot of different ways to address that solution. And I think we found something that was very much tailored for what we needed. And it worked very well with always balancing out the customizability, the development, because, you don't want to develop something that is super over engineered. So you work through that process, and we kind of went through 3 or 4 different options, and we laid them out together to say, hey, here's what we think you can do. And, a few of those originated internally with us, a few of those originated with the Havensight team. And then I think we actually wound up with something that was kind of a combination of the both. So being prepared to have those conversations and being prepared to kind of adapt and adjust depending on how, what you come across and how those difficulties change was a big part of why we were successful here. So keeping that open mind and know that, you are working together here. And I think depending on your knowledge of the system and what you want, you can get a wide range of support. You've got someone that could come in and kind of develop the whole thing for you, or you can drive some of the ideas and some of the ideation yourself, depending on what you need. So I think it is flexible from that perspective. And we were fortunate, I think, to kind of have a nice, strong kind of back and forth there, which got us towards we think, a better solution in the end.
All right. Well, Steve, I heard you talking about, the feedback you heard from the Havensight team during the project, and that led to where we are today with Charles River Labs, and got me thinking more about the project itself. So Matt, I think you were pretty engaged as part of the deployment of the project, right? Can you share for our customers really like what's the experience being in an implementation, right? Being in the project itself. Can you talk a little bit about, who was from Charles River Labs, who was there on your team? What kind of roles you had your team? What's that project duration like? Was there deadlines you had to make? Tell us a little bit about the project implementation side.
Yeah, so as we were kind of going into this, right, we knew we had a relatively quick turnaround that we wanted to get this implemented, just to kind of minimize the window in which we weren't performing optimally, to both satisfy, kind of the needs of regulatory requirements, making sure that we were very sharp on that end from a quality perspective, but also make sure that we were satisfying the needs of all of our clients and our customers, right? I mean, that's the focus. It's got to be client-centric. So being able to drive a solution that really helped to manage the inventory. I mean, you're talking about thousands of materials across dozens of clients, millions of dollars worth of material that you're kind of handling across several different clients, several different projects. So you need something that is very sharp and very responsive, and also you have clear visibility into, to make sure that you can, get them that information quickly, and then also be able to satisfy the multiple productions that you have scheduled out. Because as those things push and shift, it becomes extremely difficult to kind of reschedule and reprioritize. So time is always of the essence. And for us, it was kind of talks initiated in maybe December, and then we had something in hand and basically being utilized by April. So you're talking about 4 to 5 months for us to implement something. And this was the first implementation. This was essentially, built from the ground up, minus, the templated formats and the solutions that Havensight already came to the table with, which is why we partnered with them. It allowed us to expedite that time frame, and then really being able to have that in 4 or 5 months. I would not expect a lot of people to recreate that type of an urgent time frame. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. If you've got more time, you should definitely try to plan a little better in advance. But we were able to accomplish that, and then when it went into play, I mean, you could see those impacts immediately. So the timeframes were very, very tight. We knew that any shifts or any things that maybe were going to slow us down were readily being discussed. How do we maybe funnel more resources? I know from our end, we navigated resources and it kind of fluctuated. We had moments where we brought in more and moments where we had people shift on to other stuff. I think Havensight did the exact same thing, where they funneled resources to get things done, to make sure that we were able to stay on track and hit our timelines. So there's a amount of mutual commitment there to the solution, and a willingness to get that done, that was extremely valuable, that allowed us to stay on track and hit the important timelines that we were looking to strive for, and really have that solution that satisfied those critical components that I mentioned. So being a part of that implementation team, I would say I functioned very much in kind of a lead role there alongside our SAP team, which was very involved in working through that development and helping them to kind of come up with solutions and having really good discussions. And then also learning along the way to be able to own that solution on the back end, combined with several other operational leaders that were part of the supply chain team, manufacturing team at our Memphis site. I functioned a little bit as an intermediary across the board with Havensight and SAP and that operational team. But the Havensight team, the operational teams, and then our SAP team, everyone was really involved. A lot of open forums, a lot of discussions. It was very much a safe space to be able to explore concerns and things that we thought might slow us down. So it was a very collaborative environment when it comes to the implementation team and the overall process. Very good communication. We had regular meetings, regular touch points. We were very clear on when we wanted to hit certain deliverables. We managed the project very well from our kind of internal IT PM perspective, along with Havensight's PM's, components. I think there was a really good cooperative, project management relationship there. So it was a very intense, a very involved project and process, but very, very satisfying and really collaborative. And I think, very successful in the end.
Yeah, Matt, you talked about.
I heard you bring up the templates, Matt, and we talk about when we talk about our mobile inventory templates in before the project begins, right? When you're getting to learn about our solution, we talk about how you're starting from a very advanced starting point in a project, right? I guess my question is, can you unpack a little bit more about that templates? Like what, did the templates help guide any decision making in that project for the CRL team? Was being able to touch and feel, so to speak, if you will, that application before actually tailoring it to your requirements? Like, what was your experience of the templates from your point of view? Like, what was the impact of the templates from your point of view?
Yeah, I think even during, the RFP and the SOW and the contract, like while we were vetting out other vendors, I think your guys' ability to speak to your tool with the templated versions of these different sub processes surrounding supply chain and warehouse management, inventory management, being able to show that and feel that, being able to speak to exactly how that kind of works within a mobile device and mobile application. Very beneficial for sure. We've got the ability, you can drive some of those things in Fiori apps and things like that too internally, but it takes time to build and it takes time to explore that. So being able to see those things directly, I think that really drove us in the direction to partner with Havensight, but also immediately then, as soon as we just made that decision, we were right into the development, right? And working in those same applications, understanding exactly how they worked, what kind of actions were dictating certain transactions in SAP. Once you start to understand how those things are integrating together and what it's really driving, you really start to then build the business requirements and the functional specs. So being able to see it up front, I think helped us to build those business requirements better because we knew kind of what to expect and what to look out for, as well as the functional specs, which again, you guys helped develop and really drove. You see that develop right from the application. So you're doing it as you're looking at it. And then you take that as your baseline. You've got a strong foundation to start on. And then it's a lot less time to develop something that actually fits your needs and is more customizable when you build in these extra solutions. So the templates themselves are great because you get a visual at it right up front. It allows you to kind of develop how you see your process fitting into that. But then they're meant to be there to kind of iterate on and build off of. So I think it was a very successful strategy to kind of employ those and really understand where we were starting, allow us to kind of ideate a little better, and then really build on them towards our final solution, which don't look exactly like your templates, but they definitely have a lot of core components in there where to start from.
And in the templates,
Yeah, I hope and we see that as an advantage for you, right? It's kind of like it's easy to edit a blank page and it is to start with a blank page, for those who do any sort of writing, right? It's a similar analogy there.
You mentioned that there were some tough conversations, right? With your team, with our team, as we kind of drove toward the business requirements you guys had. and how we could meet those with the mobile solution. Did the templates help when you were going through that process? And I know um, that kind of wasn't the idea behind the question around templates, but as I thought back to that segment, I'm thinking, well, certainly those might have helped, probably did help guide the conversation. Because I think a lot of times customers deploy SAP. We talk about the business process. We blindly know that SAP can do a lot of things in the background, but you can't visualize it, and it seems to be a gap. And I think with the templates, and I don't know if it's been your experience with the templates, you can kind of see what we're talking about as we're talking about it. And then you can make a better business decision. Do we change it in the back end, or do we try to do it in the mobile? Did you have that experience?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's pretty well said there. And I'm going to say, a phrase that's the smartest and the dumbest phrase, which is you don't know what you don't know, right? So I did not go into this as an SAP expert. I did not have a lot of experience. I learned a lot as we were working through it. I committed the time to kind of drive in there and really understand the system. And a lot of that learning was through this process while we work with your team, because you guys do have experts on your staff that can drive these decisions. So when we come up with the business requirements, right, we're kind of speaking very theoretical into how do we want that to work. I want to be able to execute this type of a transaction. I want to take this material and move it to here. I want it to look like this. I want it to take this quantity, understand this. I want it to check if it does this. As we kind of lay that out theoretically, we're taking that theory, put it directly in with the templates, seeing if it accomplishes that goal. We're asking questions to say, hey, it doesn't do that. That's not the way that we want it to work. You're saying, okay, well, what if we tweak this? What if we make it work this way? So it's like what Damien said, you're not working off of a blank sheet. You're putting it in there. You're putting your requirements directly into practice. Being able to do that, you can then see whether or not the template is exactly what you need or if it requires tweaks. And then your team is suggesting things along the way. Well, okay, well, what if we change this interface? What if we can change this selection? We change the way that this piece of data reacts. This will indicate this type of a change in SAP. That's really how the system is built. It's you start from the template and you're really driving from the requirements, and then that back and forth where you're talking through as you're building it, whether or not it's working for you and what you're looking for. And then you guys would go build, come back, we'd have the same conversation. Hey, this is what we heard. Is this what you're seeing? Or is this exactly satisfying what you want? Yeah, maybe it is, you nailed it. Or, hey, we told you the wrong thing. This is what we actually need. There's a lot of that because you really don't know what you don't know. And then until you really get it and you put your hands on it and you see it live, it's really hard to kind of speak those things into existence. So it's a constant iterative process. It takes patience because there are some miscommunications. There are relaying of bad data, bad information, and you just got to keep kind of pushing forward. And I think as long as you continue to clear those things out, knowing that they're going to pop up, and you just got to clarify those things, ask the right questions, which we were able to do, I think, as partners in this. That's really where it really helps to do that, and the templates definitely help you frame those conversations.
Yeah. So another question, and this is one that we always ask ourselves after a customer project. We've done this for years because we like to get feedback. What lessons learned did you guys have? Maybe from an overall project, from the user pool. I don't know if you guys did a lessons learned exercise after the project wrapped up, formally or informally, but what kind of feedback do you have? Would you share with other people that are thinking about doing a project like this down the road?
We did do a lessons learned internally, and there were some of those things that were very internal in nature, and there was also things that I think were with the partnership. Hey, how do you make sure you're driving the best folks from the Havensight team to support what you need and really speaking to what you need? And we had different types of integrations and things like that where we would kind of work through, hey, what do we truly need here? And okay, awesome, that sounds good. I think we understand your need now. Let us pull someone in that can support that. So I think just really being clear about what you need and really speaking through that and being able to work through that. And don't think that your first pass, when you talk about your requirements and your functional specs, as you move further down the line, you want to get closer and closer to what you truly need. So that way the team can build and really have good directions to build, because there's a million different ways to construct an SAP. The system is very, very powerful. it is really, really good when you know how to use it. The problem is when you sometimes don't know how to use it and you're kind of misspeaking on what you think you need. The folks will still build that, right? Because you can. Whatever we tell you, you can build. So it's really kind of just asking those questions and being able to dig a little deeper. Don't be afraid to ask, well, why do you want to do that, right? I'm telling you maybe something to do and you're not sure about it. So Havensight says, well, what are you looking to accomplish there? Why do you want to do that? Because maybe we're not accurate in what we're describing or what we need. And it was the same vice versa, right? I'm asking you why you guys are trying to build in a certain way just to make sure that I understand what the intent is. So, I mean, that's my job in a nutshell as well, as I ask the question why a lot. So driving on that why question and really understanding why we're making decisions and why we're trying to drive in a certain direction, you're going to walk away with a much better understanding of your system and what is built for you, the data that lives within it. And you're also going to probably save time and frustration because you're more clear on what your requirements are. The Havensight team, or the teams that are working on this project, are really understanding what the needs are, and then you're all driving towards the same solution. So that was a huge core concept that we know is very critical. We've highlighted that business requirement document from our end. So before we even get involved with anything, we're really trying to drive that. So we know why we're trying to do something and the value that we're trying to extract. So we're trying to push that concept out further on our end. So yeah, I think that was really one of the most critical things as far as lessons learned. And understanding that you're probably not going to build that perfect solution up front, but the way that you guys have this kind of setup established is, yeah, there's the opportunity to have continued support with PCAP and continue to develop, but there's also the chance to own that solution. And we took a balanced approach, right? There was the ability to do both. So that flexibility and understanding that, you do own that solution, but as a result of that, you own the continued development and iteration on it. And whatever that path looks like, don't let that kind of get stagnant, and you're not going to maybe get it perfect the first time through. So being able to learn quickly and adjust. I don't want to throw around the term like agile, a buzzword too aggressively, but it's a really strong approach if you can take that mindset and then truly commit to it, because you can build something, start really appreciating it, understanding what it does, and then knowing that you're going to kind of build on it and learn from it. That's a very strong approach as well.
So, how would you compare this project? And I think maybe it was the first time you had done mobile for this sector of your business. How would you compare a general SAP project to this one, which was really a mobile initiative? Are there big differences, small differences? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I think they're different, right? I think a lot of initial SAP implementations, they're really driven around the financials, the accounting component. Make sure you establish that strong framework, and then the utilization of the supply chain modules was relatively new to us, within the manufacturing business. But we did a really nice job, I think, getting all those things implemented and laid out. I think the understanding of the process and continuing to build around that, and knowing that you've got to be flexible there, that's definitely a big piece of it. I think understanding that a solution like this exists to further functionalize a very complex setup like warehouse management within SAP is very valuable. So the fact that we now have that as a potential partner type approach, and being able to roll those things out together for any additional sites or any additional functionality, that really positions us to be successful, because now we have a stronger overall tool and system to be able to build, and we know we have a process that we can build around. So that's a very fortunate position that we're in now, that as we drive on maybe additional SAP implementations in the future, we've got a much stronger toolbox, we think, to be able to deliver a more effective and functional solution for our businesses.
Yeah, and I think final question for me at least. So you guys are in a unique environment, right? You're a regulated industry, and you've got special considerations around documentation and testing. Can you tell me how you planned, or how your team planned for integration testing at the end, and what that process looked like? Did you do anything special because it was mobile? What did you do there?
Yeah, so SAP as a system is an enterprise system that's controlled at the global level for Charles River, and it's as it should be, right? It services a lot of our sites, and it's a truly enterprise kind of network software and system. So we had to approach it, from that perspective, and making sure that we were really sharp. We've got a really strong global SAP team that does that, and making sure that we stick with appropriate compliance and validation components. So we laid out full on user acceptance testing, validation components, making sure that we were driving all the appropriate user requirements specs, system requirements specs, updating anything at the global level that was impactful, making sure that we handled at the site level, all while taking into consideration, the multitude of market and industry compliance components and regulations. So it certainly wasn't easy. It was a lot of stuff where I think we were able to relate good information to Havensight and then kind of have a back and forth, but also being really, really engaged with our quality team throughout the entirety of this implementation and driving the understanding of how the system will be used, how the data will move. The fact that we were driving a more impactful user experience and a more beneficial user experience while not really disrupting a lot of the core functionality and core security components and compliance components of SAP. That was a really strong part and a really important part of this integration and implementation, because you did not have to really manipulate too much how SAP worked. What we're able to do is just improve the user experience, take people from the GUI into something that is a little bit smoother and was able to kind of integrate appropriately and really effectively. So those compliance components are definitely difficult, but we had a lot of people contributing to that, a lot of people understanding, what the need was and where we were driving on. So I think it was very effective from that perspective. But yeah, it certainly wasn't without a lot of effort and really understanding how it impacts the system as a whole, as well as kind of the individual and site level processes.
All right. Well, Matt, just want to thank you, for investing your most valuable asset, your time, with us today. For all those listeners listening today, thanks for tuning in to the SAP Mobile Advisor podcast. If you found today's insights helpful, be sure to follow the show, leave a review. It helps others discover us. And if you're looking for more resources, case studies, and podcasts, head to havensightconsulting.com or connect with me or Steve on LinkedIn. Otherwise, stay smart, stay mobile, stay at the leading edge. Until next time. Thank you, everybody.